Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield. I'm Josh Williams, and I'm joined by David Hughes, who this week is wearing a cap and covered in the wig. How you getting
Yeah,
on?
I'm all right, mate. I was going to come up with a good excuse why, but the truth is, I just haven't had a shower, so I couldn't tame the beast today. So yeah, I've gone with a cap just to keep everything on the wraps, and then maybe I'll mix it up again next week.
Yeah, well, for those who have been tuned out while there's been no football, this has been a bit of a recurring theme throughout the weeks of lockdown. Dave's been gradually getting closer towards like David's every week. Um, bit of a recurring theme, but I think now with football officially back, English football, maybe we will start to move away from that. We'll see how Dave's wig gets on it.
Yeah, wait until
Uh,
I hopefully go to barbers in the next couple of weeks, and then we can put this whole chapter to bed.
yeah. Well, as I said, anyway, football is back. Um, Manchester City played last night. We are recording on the Thursday, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, before we get into it, and I should say as well, for those who listen every week, thank you. But we're going to do this week's episode a little bit different to usual. Visually, so the way we've got the chance this week to go through Liverpool's opponents, we're going to look at Everton and we're going to look at Crystal Palace. And usually, we talk about the opponents, where they're dangerous and stuff like that, what we can exploit, and you wouldn't really see anything this week because we have the luxury of presenting over this call. We can actually show our viewers and our listeners, what we're looking at. So this week we're going to be a lot more visual than usual. So those who usually listen, I'd advise you this week to give it a watch on YouTube and see how see what you make of it. See if you think it's better, or see if we should stick with it or whatever. But we'll see how we go anyway. So before we get into those two, did you catch last night's matches?
Yeah, mate. I wouldn't be much of a football fan if I didn't watch those two on the return. Um, yeah, it was good. Obviously, the first game was a bit flat, but you know what? I kind of expected it. It just that panned out a little bit to what I was expecting, but the second one was obviously a little bit more lively, a lot more, traditional entertainment in it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really picked up on, especially in the first match, was the lack of risk taken on the ball. A
Mm.
lot of players just kind of reluctant to play those line breaking passes that you'd maybe be a bit more inclined to play when there's a lot of atmosphere and fans screaming at you and things like that. So
Mm.
I felt like a lot more of a safe match to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd say you could probably confirm that when kind of behaviours off the ball as well. There seems to be a lack of, I don't think commitment's the right term because I think every player out there wants to win the game, but maybe just that 10 or 20% boost that you get off the crowd, it was just lacking a little bit. Just looked a bit pedestrian in moments.
yeah. I think the crowd as well tends to impact like almost the randomness of football. They have an influence over that, I think, and without the fans there, footballers, are essentially allowed to think straight a bit more and think a bit clearer. And as a consequence, maybe they'll do less silly things on the ball, unless you're David Luiz, of course.
Yeah, except if
Um,
you're
yeah, sadly, City won. Obviously,
them.
like 3 goals to nil it was. So Liverpool can't win the title at Goodison Park. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Dave.
Slept like a baby last night, I tell you. Yeah, obviously, most people who watch the show know that I am an Everton fan, but it might surprise a few people. And it doesn't interfere with any sort of objective analysis that I do with yourself on the show or away from the show. But I won't lie, I was kind of rooting for that one not to happen because I think that would have lingered for many years to come had that happened, and I wouldn't have fancied Everton stopping Liverpool on Sunday either. So it was really all in the City's hands last night. So yeah, I apologise to everybody listening. I'm still very objective with Liverpool, as you know, but yeah, I was quite relieved last night. I won't lie.
Yeah, I think it's one of them, though, isn't it, where you've got David Luiz. Does your phone screensaver or something like that?
Yeah, that's it. I did say I'll buy him a pint if I ever see him out. But I mean, what a terrible performance by him. It was just.
I know. Well, considering this is a Liverpool show, I feel like I've experienced those players a lot of years. Players like Mignolet especially. Dejan loves him, does it? Man, did a few times, and these players were just really error prone. There's no other word for it. And no matter how well coached you are, no matter how good your system is, all the hard work that you do, it just takes one mistake by those players to cost you, and you're behind, and you're chasing the game and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah. Well, the decisive moments in games, aren't they, are normally split second kind of situations. And if you just think of what happened with him yesterday, the two really decisive things that kind of decided the game were all his fault, and they were both errors, and that's the game gone then. Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, just before we get into the Liverpool previews, just one or two things that we may have learned from the Bundesliga ahead of the Premier League properly restarting. So going by the Bundesliga, obviously now we're allowed 5 substitutions. Only Paderborn in the whole of the Bundesliga have used 5 subs in every single match. And Bayern, who you'd expect to, have the deepest squad and that sort of thing, and, substitution would probably benefit them the most. They've used the second least on average, actually, with about 3.8 per game. And in terms of England, how the season's gone so far, no Premier League manager has used substitutes more often than Jurgen Klopp, and who's level with Graham Potter. They've used all 3 substitutes in 27 of their 29 matches this season, followed interestingly by Carlo Ancelotti. I think there's 2 other coaches in there. Manuel Pellegrini was in there, and I think Pochettino, but they're obviously unemployed at the moment. So yeah, we'll get into the Merseyside derby then. So, general thoughts, Dave, ahead of the match?
Yeah, I think obviously from a Liverpool point of view, I'd have to be very confident for this one. I just think, ironically, Liverpool haven't got considering they're in the midst of their kind of best unbeaten run in the derby fixture, they haven't got the greatest record at Goodison, just 1 win in 7. Obviously, no defeats in that time, of course, but even that 1 win was a last minute. So I feel like it's always been a bit of a tough place to not necessarily avoid defeat, but go on and win games there. But I think that is often down to the crowd and just how emotive Goodison can be for the bigger games, and that maybe just slightly nullifying some of Liverpool's strengths whilst raising the performance of Everton players. I just can't see that happening on Sunday. And you've already touched on it earlier in the show, where you said about how without that kind of noise from the fans, players can just be a little bit more clear in decision making and not kind of get weighed down, I guess, by the atmosphere. There's not going to be any there. I just think that's where the class of the top players can kind of come to the forefront. And I think from a Liverpool point of view, I'd be very confident this weekend.
Yeah, I do feel more confident than usual, and I think that probably relates to it. I am glad that there's obviously no crowd there, because I think Goodison is one of the toughest places in the Premier League to go, especially if you're a Liverpool team. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how it plays out. It'll be interesting to see if both teams can be as intense as they would like to be on a normal given week. I think the start of the Arsenal City game was really fast. The tempo was really good. I was quite impressed with that. But whether Liverpool and Everton start with that intensity, considering the risk of losing the derby, maybe they'll be a bit more cautious from the off. Who knows? But
one thing, sorry, Josh, I was going to say, one thing I do think is interesting with the narrative of this particular game is it kind of feels like both teams can just, if they really wanted to, throw caution to the wind and just go for it, because Liverpool are going to win the title anyway. And if they didn't win on Sunday and set up the victory at Anfield against Palace, then I think, am I right in saying they can then go and win it at City, which would be quite a nice way to do it. So they may just be tempted to just go out and go all out at Everton. Most likely win, but not really lose any sleep if they don't. Whereas Everton are expected to get beat anyway. Haven't really got that much to play for. Slim chance of Europe, but it looks a bit of a stretch. So they might just go all out as well. It could end up being a bit of a wild game.
Yeah, it is a difficult one to predict. If you actually look at the form, which there's probably no value in doing at all. But Liverpool have actually lost 3 of their last 4 matches in all competitions.
Crazy.
Watford, Atletico Madrid, and I think there was one more team in there. I can't remember who it was.
Chelsea, was it? FA Cup.
Yeah, Chelsea it was. And if you look at Everton's last match, I think I'm right in saying was a 4-0 defeat to Chelsea as well.
Yeah, and really well beaten in that game as well.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly. I think both teams will be going into it with effectively a blank slate in their heads. I don't think past results will be playing any kind of factor in this. But just seeing Carlo Ancelotti then.
Just before we move on, Josh, what is your thoughts on the whole home form home advantage stuff?
I don't think it's going to do it. I've seen the odd claim towards the Bundesliga that home wins are down by a certain percentage and things like that, and I don't think it's just a case of maybe the better performing team wins or that sort of thing. I think there's less outside influence from factors. I think even the referee as well. The referee's less impacted by the supporters and things like that. So the referee's making more objective decisions than he was before. So I think there's less time being wasted and things like that. Because the ball gets back and play a bit quicker and things. So I think it's generally a fair game, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny. So I've written about this from a Liverpool point of view in a piece that'll be going out on Liverpool Echo over the next day or so. And I did look into kind of using the Bundesliga as this rare opportunity to actually look at a kind of sample of games behind closed doors, because obviously traditionally football's always played in front of many spectators, so you don't really get to see it. And the before COVID-19, there were 43% of Bundesliga matches had ended in home wins, and since it's restarted, that's dropped to 21%. You already touched on it there. I think a key difference is the sample size. It was roughly, I think it was 448 pre-pandemic Bundesliga matches compared to just 52 post. So, obviously, as you've already said, that's a low number of fixtures, can be heavily influenced by, unbalanced matchups, injuries, looks, referees, whatever, loads of impacting variables. But if you actually look at the Bundesliga 2, Australian Bundesliga, the Danish Superliga and Poland's top division, you've actually seen a similar drop in home wins there as well. I think it looks like home wins have halved across all those divisions since they've all restarted. But I also agree that I don't think suddenly it's become an advantage for an away side, because it just doesn't make any logical sense, does it, that from the away side to be playing in an unrecognised empty stadium compared to the hosts who, there's no fans there, but they play there, half their fixtures a season. It seems to make sense that it would benefit the away side. But I think ultimately what it is it's come down to maybe just home teams have now lost that advantage. So away sides aren't necessarily getting a better advantage, but home sides have just lost a little advantage that they had in terms of having the fans there. And as you just touched on there, I think it's just making for a more balanced game, which in the case of this one on Sunday, Everton versus Liverpool, really just kind of turns the tide more into a potential Liverpool victory.
Yeah, well, as you were saying it then, I was thinking to myself, Liverpool played a few of the fiercest rivals, let's say, at home in the first leg of the season. And if you look at the next few weeks, we've obviously got Everton supposed to be away, Man City supposed to be away, and we're playing against both of those teams.
Is Arsenal in there as well? Is that
Arsenal's
right?
in there, yeah. Chelsea was supposed to be at Anfield. United have played twice. But yeah, I mean, City and Everton, obviously two of our fiercest rivals, highly likely to want us to lose a few more games. But they won't have the home support. So I think maybe from a Liverpool perspective, maybe we have benefited very slightly.
Yeah.
But yeah, just in terms of Carlo Ancelotti, then what exactly has he done to Everton? How do you expect the team to set up and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so it feels like he's, if I'm being brutally honest, it feels like he's come in and probably realised that the side that he's inherited is fairly limited in their abilities. You know, they've got some really good players, as we've mentioned before. You know, you got like Richarlison, Luca Dean and stuff, or Luca Digne, whichever you prefer. So they've got some good talent in there, but as a whole, it's a fairly limited side at the moment, mainly through some bad recruitment over the years. So he's kind of come in and just installed a really basic 4-4-2 formation because it's a formation that can really be adopted fairly easily and get the best out of the players that he has. So Everton in possession and look to be quite penetrative. You've got your two up top, Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin, who are actually really good in terms of, you know, winning balls in the air, working hard off the ball, holding the ball up well. You know, two really good forwards, probably two of the best in the Premier League. Then the wingers tend to drift inside, almost like, I guess sometimes it'd look a little bit like a 4-2-2-2. Have I added the two on there?
No, I always question whether I do that as well.
Yeah, it's you know, it doesn't look good for me math skills, but just with the idea of, you know, creating space for wing backs, and that's where Everton are normally most dangerous and focus a lot of their attacks down the flanks and getting balls into the box.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I picked up on was that they're a lot more vertical, a lot more forward thinking, a lot less possession orientated, and that sort of thing. And I think that's just generally suited the team, to be honest, because I think they were inclined to, I don't know, build possession games and that under Marco. He didn't really have the players to penetrate, really. I thought, at least.
No, you're right. Yeah, totally.
Just what you mentioned there about Everton's 4-2-2-2.
I'm gonna have to count it like that in the future, I think.
Yeah. We'll start with the visualization, so hopefully you can see that, Dave.
Yeah, can't believe you used the red format.
I'm sticking with the blood red theme, aren't I?
Yeah, I suppose.
This is the blood red channel, isn't it? So yeah, but hopefully, if you're watching, you can see that that's Everton's most used system this season, 4-4-2. As Dave said, the wide midfielders at least, tend to put inside and form kind of an attacking bank of four. Fullbacks push on, and the central midfielders tend to sit. Obviously, they've had very little stability with that in terms of injuries and things like that, but that's kind of what we're going up against. There's nothing particularly, let's say, unique maybe about the 4-4-2 system that Ancelotti's using. I think one thing I will point out is that the banks of four that you can see there, Chelsea, I think, had a lot of joy playing through when he beat Everton 4-0. Billy Gilmore, I think, was one to shine. I'm not sure Liverpool will be quite as technical breaking the lines as Chelsea were. I think Liverpool are a bit more direct, but that was one thing, that one weakness that I definitely picked up on when I was watching Everton against Chelsea those few months ago.
Yeah, it was really bad. It felt like players kind of drifting in between the lines, and Everton just lacked any real. I can't think of the term I'm looking for. Dynamism, I guess, through the middle, where they just couldn't seem to close them down quick enough. Couldn't really track the movements, and a lot of overloads in the midfield, and they just really struggled to handle it. I'm not really sure how they're going to counter it this weekend either. I know Liverpool don't tend to build a ton through the middle, but if you think of the way Firmino drops off and that kind of behaviour, I think that'll be quite difficult for them to contain.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting match. I mean, one of the weakness I think I can't not highlight is Jordan Pickford.
Yeah.
I think there's obviously we've got Alisson back as well, which is highly beneficial for Liverpool. But I think Pickford, if I was a Blue at least, would be a concern considering the number of shots Liverpool tend to have and the number of shots Liverpool tend to go on target.
Yeah, Pickford. Well, I've been his biggest critic at times. I'm just not impressed. I don't think he looks as if he's performing as a top keeper at the moment. I think all the metrics, and I'm sure we've talked about even on this show, but I know we have on other shows about how he's one of the worst ranking keepers certainly in the Premier League this season. And he's got a lot to prove. I think if he wants to try and stay a side like Everton, who are obviously they got someone like Ancelotti, and now they're clearly trying to climb towards those European places. I think he needs to show a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you can see that visualization on the screen there. That is the shots on target that Jordan Pickford has faced in the Premier League this season. Those that are grey, those that are grey were off target or blocked. Those that are in colour are the shots that he's faced, and the stars are the goals. The stars are the shots that I've actually found a net. And I think for me, there's too many there that I would expect him to. I mean, at a glance, at least, I mean, you obviously can't see the actual situation, but at a glance, you'd expect him to save a few more of them, particularly the 4 or 5 outside the box.
Yeah, there's one that right before the COVID-19, maybe the last home game for Everton, Bruno Fernandes beat him. And if you're looking at the visualization now, I think it's the one to our right, looking at it, further to the right outside the box, one more down. I think it's
that
yeah,
one
I think it was that one, yeah. And it was something that even an average keeper I think would have dealt with, and it managed to kind of squeeze under his body, and it was a really bad goal to concede from a nothing moment, really. And obviously,
I think that goal as well was the first goal of the match, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly.
So
crucial.
Everton immediately had to start chasing the game.
Sorry, it wasn't. No. It was Everton had scored early on, and you really want to build on it, and you end up conceding a really cheap goal like this, and suddenly United are back in the game, and ultimately that's cost Everton 3 points. Well, cost them 2 points because the game's finished, the draw, and there's just been too much of that this season. I think he can pull out decent saves, but there's no point. There's no point doing these great saves. You're just going to undo that good work by not doing the basics. But you can see that the cheap one against Palace, who we'll be talking about in a bit as well, Benteke scored a really poor goal to concede from an Everton point of view. He's a concern.
I mean, this might be, I don't know, it's hard judgmental, but I think looking at Pickford's character, I'm inclined to think maybe he'll be one of the few who suffer from the lack of atmosphere in the ground, or maybe even benefit from it. I think he's the type to. I just think he loves the drama. I've said this a few times to you, haven't I? And I think if there's less of that going on, maybe he'll be more inclined to focus on what his job is really.
Yeah, I agree. I think he does. He kind of just loves that the buzz, and you've seen he's someone who's in these highly emotive games. He's someone who's a liability. Some players thrive on it and find that kind of next level. Really, he for me is a liability. I've saw it often in the derby games, and another really big fixture for him in terms of emotions is Newcastle. Obviously being a Sunderland-born lad, and he's had some really poor games against Newcastle. One at St James's Park last season where he was a bit all over the show and he gave away a penalty. And he's pulling these stupid faces as he's kind of coming off like he's enjoying the banter, I guess. But it's just not what you want to just think of, like a calm and presence. If we use Alisson as the most obvious example, you never really see him looking flustered or kind of excitable, do you? He's kind of just doing his job at all times and a bit of a calm and presence for the defence and the team.
Yeah, I mean, I've said plenty. I'm not the biggest fan of Pickford. I think that's quite well known, to be honest. But But have you got any thoughts then in terms of like whether he will benefit or suffer from this sort of environment?
I think he could potentially benefit. I think, it's not something I've really thought about until you've just mentioned it then. But he's kind of lost the trust a little bit of Everton fans, I feel anyway. And this can create a little bit of nerves, a little bit of getting on his back if he does something wrong, or a bit of a loose pass, or doesn't quite collect, drops it. Just these little things where if you've got the support of your home fans, they tend to get a pass. But when you Pickford, who hasn't really recovered with the fan base since the era at Anfield last season, I think it might just do him good to not have that added pressure in the stadium.
Yeah, just at a glance of where Everton tend to get attacked, hopefully you can see that Everton tend to suffer more attacks down their own right side as opposed to their left. For me, that's not particularly surprising, considering I think Sidibe's a little bit prone to being a bit positionally flawed and things like that. And I think he's been in and out the side as well, hasn't he? Whereas on the left hand side, you've got Lucas Digne, who's a little bit stronger for me.
Yeah. When we were going to be touching on kind of where we think potential issues or weaknesses could be from an Everton point of view, the right side is something that, along with the central midfield, I highlighted, because Coleman and Sidibe are really kind of similar profiles in many ways. Coleman carries the ball up the pitch really well. Sidibe's got a really good direct attacking threat. He puts in a really good ball in the box, which is good when you've got the likes of a Charleston and Calvert-Lewin who are good in the air. But both are pretty below par in terms of the defensive output, certainly compared to other people in their positions across the division. And certainly, if we're talking about Sidibe, I think he is a player who, as you just touched on, positionally can be all over the place, a little bit out of sorts. And as we're seeing there on the visualization, he's easily targeted, and that's kind of where a lot of people enjoy getting their success. Well, a lot of sides do. Sorry, enjoy getting success against Everton, going down that flank.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously the flank that Sadio Mane tends to occupy, so it'll be a little bit ominous, to be honest, that prospect. See how it plays out. I think both teams do have quite an interest though in set pieces for me. I think Liverpool, that's almost undeniable really. But I think Everton have shown the odd little setup since Ancelotti's came in. I think they've used Yerry Mina a few times, who he's out, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He'll be out for this one.
Yeah, maybe they'll be less inclined to then if they haven't got the 6'4" man inside the penalty box. But I think considering how tight the match could be, on paper at least, a set piece could be quite an easy way around getting ahead in the match, really, especially considering if Van Dijk goes up, he won't have to deal with Mina. I think Van Dijk will be the tallest on the pitch by. I think Mason Holgate's only about 5'11". Isn't that tall for a centre back?
He's good in ground duels, Holgate, but in terms of aerial threat, he's probably someone that Van Dijk could be thinking, I could maybe take advantage of coming up against him. You'd like to think that Everton wouldn't kind of make that 1v1 in a set piece situation, but it can happen. Liverpool are really good, as you've touched on there, with set pieces, and I'm sure be finding ways where they can create these mismatches in the box.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Van Dijk, and we'll bring Gomez in as well, I am inclined to think that this will be a much tougher game than they're used to dealing with. And in terms of this being the first game back, I don't really think you can think of a strike pairing in the whole of the Premier League who are a worse duo to face in your first competitive match back. I think they're a handful with Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin, and yeah, I think our two centre backs they're usually really, really in control of everything they do, really. But I think when you're facing two physical players like that who are also mobile and really in your face, I think it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you think in the modern game now, most centre-back pairings tend to face, you know, one centre forward who they can between them, hopefully try and govern and, you know, pass on to the partner and then take them back and just kind of monitor them in that way. But if you're going to be facing two, both centre backs going to have basically a direct 1v1 opponent, and then when you throw in the stuff that you just said about how mobile they are, how they're pretty good in the air, willing runners as well. You know, they'll make runs into the flanks behind the defence. Yeah, I think they're going to. I'm not saying that Liverpool's backs pair and couldn't handle them, but as you say, I think it'll just be a tougher evening than what they're probably used to.
Yeah, you mentioned that they're pretty good in the air. Little bit of an understatement. I had a little look before at the shots that Everton have taken this season, and in particular the headed shots. So hopefully you can see that. Considering every team's now played the same amount of matches, I think I'm right in saying that is the total number of headed shots of every team in the Premier League this season. Everton out in front at the top considerably with around 80. That is, I'd assume most of them to be from Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin, possibly a few from corners from Yerry Mina, I think.
Yeah. Last I checked on that, Josh. Sorry. I checked on that, it was I think 3 of the top 5 of the Premier League in terms of headed shot attempts with Everton players, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin, and Yerry Mina, which gives you an indication of just how kind of it's a real important form of attack for them.
Yeah, I mean, the difference there between, say, for example, Manchester United, who are really near the bottom, and Chelsea, who are in second place, the difference in those two is almost the difference in Chelsea and Everton, in terms of the size of the bars. So obviously Everton are really big on posing an aerial threat and that sort of thing. Obviously you've got Lucas Digne on the flanks, putting deliveries in. You know, thankfully we've got a really competent keeper, and we've got probably the best centre back in the league in the air, possibly alongside Harry Maguire. So I think I've said in the past that I wouldn't overly expect Liverpool to struggle, but I think the last time I said that, I think Richarlison scored a header at Anfield.
Yeah, which was rare to see. You know, we don't see that a lot, really. That was quite a surprise to see the header. Like, in fact, am I right in? I might be getting confused here because the game was a while ago. Was the 2 headed efforts in that game?
I can't even remember. I feel like there probably was.
I'll have a little gander whilst you're having a chat. But for some reason, I feel like Michael Keane, maybe. It was a really unusual scorer who managed to put one in. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Michael Keane.
Yeah, Michael Keane. Yeah. So excuse me. He scored a headed effort, I think, which was quite rare to see. Oh no, it wasn't. It was just from a set piece. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah. In terms of further threats, then that Liverpool will have to cater for, sort of thing. Put this together before. Hopefully you can see that. So that one is number of touches per progressive pass. So essentially, the player at the top when he's on the ball is the most likely player in the Everton squad to play a progressive pass, whereas Yerry Mina at the bottom is the least likely to play a progressive pass. Yerry Mina plays a progressive pass roughly every 24 touches. Lucas Digne, on the other hand, progressive pass roughly every 7 touches, along with Alex Iwobi, who, where gets a bit of stick from certain Everton groups. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
But if you look at Everton there, obviously the 2 fullbacks quite influential in terms of bringing Everton up the field. Iwobi, another one who you've probably got to keep an eye on. But other than that, maybe you'd be inclined to say that you're not particularly worried, especially considering the players in central zones, with the exception of Tom Davies, who I'm not sure will play. Andre Gomes isn't particularly inclined to hit one. Fabian Delph, who I think is injured. yeah, those are the players who essentially are likely to bring Everton closer towards Liverpool's goal. So you've probably got to keep an eye on them. Any surprises there, Dave?
No, it seems right to me that, and it's kind of what you probably expect on the pitch as well. Iwobi does get a lot of stick, but I think the reason why is, and we've covered this topic before, is he's a player who'll try and play progressive passes. Make passes work in and around the final third. They might not always come off, but when they do, they're a lot more. They have a lot more of an impact for the side than say players who are a little bit more reserved in possession. But sometimes the narrative from that can present a player as being wasteful. Iwobi isn't that, but that's how it can sometimes seen. I think that's why he's kind of thought of the way he is at Everton at the moment. But yeah, I think what you've pretty much highlighted with that viz there, the players who are going to be the ones trying to make things happen inside Liverpool's half if they can.
Yeah, it's essentially it could even go, come down to a battle of fullbacks, really, couldn't it? Because I think Liverpool's on the opposite side would be similar if I was to get. I haven't produced Liverpool's viz this time around, but I'd assume Liverpool's to be really, really similar in terms of Trent and Robertson being all progressive. So yeah, it could be a case of for the fullbacks to perform the best or something like that.
Yeah, I'm expecting Everton to be fit a lot more compact in this game than they were as well against Chelsea. So they probably will think, although we know how good Liverpool's fullbacks are, they'll probably just think, let them have it in those wide areas and just remain fairly compact through the middle and focus on basically avoiding keeping the threat away from the goal.
Yeah. So what's your verdict on this one then? Where do you see it going? Where do you see the game being won or lost, sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that I have to be honest. For me, Mane is just being phenomenal over these last 18 months, and I think him up against that right side is a big issue. I think that's going to be potentially where we could see the game won for Liverpool. I can't see anything but a Liverpool win.
Saying that, I actually recall in the Anfield, I recall Robertson basically playing as a winger, and I recall Liverpool getting in quite a few times. Marco Silva was in charge at the time, but Liverpool, I recall, played plenty of diagonal passes towards that side of the pitch. And it obviously worked on a day. I'll try and get up a little graphic that I put together because I remember writing about it actually at the time. But maybe that's where it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I think it will. One difference in that game was I thought the line was too high and there was no pressure on the person in possession, so they could just kind of take the time, get their head up and pick the pass out. I'd like to think Ancelotti is a little bit more savvy than Silva is. They might make them work a little bit harder for that, but yeah, I think that is really going to be a weak pass. I think Liverpool's left side's really good, as is the right, but I think Everton's left side can deal a little bit better with it. But Everton's right side versus Liverpool's left, I think that could be the decisive area where we're going to see Liverpool probably get the most success in terms of creating chances.
Yeah, I've just found the photo here. I'm not sure if it'll work getting up because it's quite a small photo for some reason. But there is. It captures what the ploy was in terms of the tactical shape, at least. So that's kind of what happened, I suppose. Robertson would constantly make those runs, and Trent is up here, whereas Robertson's down here, and I think Liverpool were a little bit asymmetric in that way. A bit more penetrative down Everton's right, and maybe a bit more, I don't know, let's say creative on Everton's left, sort of thing, without being particularly penetrative. So it'd be interesting to see if we go down that route again. Can you remember what Everton's formation was on that day?
I can't. I've got a feeling it could have been maybe a 4-2-3-1 potentially, but having a look at, bring that graphic back up for us, please. Let's have a look at it.
I'm gonna say,
because it looked like a flat 4-4-2 without the ball. I mean, it's even looking at that now, you can see anybody watching will be able to see the major issues in the sense that you've basically got a really compact kind of high line, but then nobody pressuring the person on the ball. And
yeah, I think
when you
I think at the time we did speak after the match, didn't we, of
mm,
why it was a problem sort of thing. Particularly the lack of pressure on the ball. Hopefully you can see that again.
yeah. So if you look at that, it's terrible, really. That line, it doesn't. So it looks like they've maybe gone. It's almost like a 5-4-1 without the ball, which isn't a million miles away from what we could see on Sunday. But yeah, I think what you'd probably see there is you might see that. I think under this Ancelotti side, you'll see that defensive line a little bit further back.
Yeah,
And
I'd
you
agree on
probably
that. Yeah.
see a little bit more pressure on players. And I mean, it'll be pressing traps. It won't just be kind of running willy nilly. They'll be picking the moments to put the pressure on, but that defensive line will be a lot deeper. But this is a concern that the way we're looking at that now, I would still fancy Robertson versus Sidibe, even if that defensive line is deeper. In terms of a lofted ball over his head, I think his position's really poor. I think Liverpool will still find plenty of success doing that.
Yeah, I mean Liverpool have presented a little bit of a double jeopardy problem to him there anyway, with Mane slightly on his inside, and I think that is Firmino there just ahead of him. So I think that's quite intentional, to be honest, to just cause him a problem, to just present a few questions to him, which we've said in the past is what Liverpool are so good at doing, placing doubt in the minds of opponents, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Lovren actually played that match, and Lovren, I think, got an assist. I think one of the goals that we scored, I think it was the Origi one. Lovren assisted, so I would be surprised to see Lovren start, to be honest. But if he did, maybe he'd be in place for his long passes, because I don't think Gomez has ever really been the type to hit those.
Yeah, I think what we could potentially see more of is, and I think this is a really good. And obviously, I can't show the video itself, but I'll show it in two parts. Just give me 1 second.
Just while you're doing that, I'll get up the actual Lovren pass picture. That's the pass Lovren played, and Origi ended up scoring that. I think I'm right in saying.
Yeah, that was right. Yeah,
I feel like it was a lob. I can't remember whether it was a lob or not.
You're right. But what we've seen in terms of, and this is under Ancelotti, which I think could be a little bit more relevant to now, is just let me know if that comes up.
Yeah, am I still sharing? No.
Let's have a look. No, I think I'm on now.
Okay,
so
yeah, go on.
People have a look, you could potentially see the way Louise has carried the ball out here. You could potentially see something like Van Dijk doing that. And if you just look at Sidibe's positioning here, he's oblivious to the run of Aubameyang. And if you replace Aubameyang with, say, Mane, and then we just move it forward, he switches completely off there, a through ball, in on goal there. And I think we could see a lot of that where the clever balls just through the centre back and Sidibe onto like someone like, say, Mane running in behind, or Robertson. And I think that'll cause major issues.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think that's considering the similar threat that Aubameyang poses to Sadio Mane, and the fact that, depending on Everton's shape, Liverpool may have a centre back with a bit of space ahead of them to drive into like that. I think that is actually something that we may really see on the day. But yeah, I can't really add much more to that. Spent a bit of time on Everton there, so I'd expect the win, despite it being at Goodison Park, and we will move on swiftly to Crystal Palace. This could be the match where Liverpool win the league. So hopefully after will be, I'll be recording with no kicks on probably.
I had the confirmation I'll be covering that game at Anfield.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like of the millions of Liverpool fans around the world who would pay, that's kind of wasted on me a little bit. But it'll be good to say you were there, I suppose.
Yeah. Let me know if you can't go on here,
I'll tell you what. You just wear my cap now and put some scruffy hair underneath it. I'll give you some of mine, and I think you'd be all right to take my.
Yeah. Anyway, when we do get to Crystal Palace again, I would expect a win personally. Hodgson, we spoke earlier about substitutes. Hodgson is one of the few, is one of the lowest, in the league in terms of subs. Averages about 2.4 per match. I think there's only about I think David Moyes averages fewer, maybe one more, I'm not sure. But yeah, Hodgson tends to stick with a relatively small squad. And obviously, as we know, very, very reliant on Wilfred Zaha. They predominantly play what you would say is a 4-5-1 without the ball, 4-3-3 with it. And as I said, Zaha's the key man. Zaha's the man that they try and play through. And, any graphics that we get up now are going to catch you that, because he very clearly shows up as the main threat. There is the average positions of Palace's most used formation. As you can see, the left side forward here is Wilfred Zaha, and he's obviously the highest player closer to goal. And yeah, the threat and behind sort of thing. He's kind of offering a relatively similar dynamic to what Mane offers on our left side, I suppose. And yeah, he's certainly a player that we're going to have to cater for.
Yeah, the way that's lined up there, although it's a 4-5-1, it looks a bit like a 4-3-3 in many ways, doesn't it? And it reminds me a little bit of the Coutinho era of Liverpool's 4-3-3, where there was just such a kind of reliance on one player, and that player is just kind of the focus of all possession, and they're almost out on their own a little bit. Like, there's not that many players around Zaha there. It's kind of like give the ball to him and let him do his dribbling and progresses up the pitch type thing. And it feels like if you keep him quiet, that's basically nullifying their biggest threat.
Yeah, well, I think that actually captures the fact he's so out on his own. I think captures how his ability really to cope when he's in isolation without teammates. He can get himself out of sticky situations. He doesn't really need support as much as, say, for example, Andros Townsend does on the opposite flank. And he's that capable, really. He's that tricky. I think in terms of what he does offer to Palace, he is crucial in terms of bringing them up the field, because obviously they tend to sit very deep, and he's really important in terms of passing into the penalty box. Palace, if they ever do sell Zaha or if they lose him or whatever, I think they will have to invest in a player who I think gets us the ball for them, basically brings them closer to goal, because you don't really have many players that do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'd be really tough for Palace to replace.
Yeah, just a few more visualizations that capture what Zaha exactly offers and how Zaha tends to be played through. Just give me a second. So, in terms of pass and flow, which is the darkness of the viz captures the heat map of the players, and the arrows capture where the players are most likely to pass, where the team's most likely to pass in those areas. So I'll show you what I mean. A little bit difficult to explain. It's not coming up. You want to fill a space, Dave?
Yeah. See, this is what I love about this podcast. It's just we're so professional. But no, it's he's, as I said, he's an interesting player. I think Palace. I'll just move off slightly, Zaha, and you can pull us back in a minute. But I just think Palace are very much a side where you kind of know what you're getting, and what you probably label as a ceiling club and a ceiling side, where Hodgson will stick to what he can trust. They have the oldest team in the league. I did some analysis on teenagers in the Premier League this season, and they've only used one season, and he only amassed 13 minutes. I can't even remember who it is. So it's just under Hodgson, just a side who basically kind of almost industrious like, and just relying on flair through one individual player.
Yeah, as you can see now, I put the visualization up, and Palace's left, I think it's safe to say, is a bit more forward thinking, a bit more penetrative than the right side. The right side's a little bit more sideways. Obviously, the ball spends more time on the left as well, considering the dark patches. And yeah, I think that adequately captures Palace's threat, which I think incessantly is probably well suited to facing Liverpool, considering Van Dijk is on Liverpool, Trent right, who's probably the weakest of Liverpool's defenders without the ball. So yeah, I think Palace for a while, to be honest, for decades, it feels, have been quite well suited to facing Liverpool. I think.
Yeah. What did the first game finish? I trying to remember earlier this season.
I think we led 1-0. They equalised late on, about 84 minutes. I think it was Zaha as well, and then I think we scored a late winner.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is ringing the bell now. Yeah, November it was. It was around the same. There was that late winner Villa as well. Yeah, it was. So Firmino dropped only 3 minutes after Zaha scored. Yeah, so it's funny, isn't it? It's always in the eyes of Liverpool fans, Palace for some reason there's almost like this little not vendetta, but there's this little thing of always wanting to beat them. I think it goes to obviously what happened in 2014. And am I right in saying Josh, they were the last side to win at Anfield? Is that right in the Premier League?
I think they were. Yeah, and I think it would be quite fitting, although it's not exactly a massive rival. Let's say it would be quite fitting if we was able to win the league against Palace, who have been quite
a thorn,
a bit of a thorn. Yeah, that's the word I was going to use. Yeah, they're just the kind of the small team that won't go away really. One more on Palace's threat, and to capture what Zaha's doing. There is Palace's shot map for the season, shot locations from open play, and I think it's fair to say that it's quite weighted towards the left-hand side of the box as opposed to the right. And obviously that stems from that's where they attack most. That's where Zaha plays, and that sort of thing. So again, that's what we're dealing with. It's a very easy threat. Well, not very easy threat to identify, let's say. And I'd expect Liverpool to plan ahead for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's I suppose what one positive from a Liverpool point of view is without lacking at any real diversity to the attack, it is a lot easier for Klopp and the team to kind of prepare the Liverpool players for their threat. We always bang on, don't we? That it's really good to be a side who can attack in many different ways and be unpredictable. But sadly, Palace are quite one-dimensional, even if they're quite good in what they do offer through Zaha. So I think it'll be, again, not tempting fate from a Liverpool point of view, but I'd be very surprised if Liverpool didn't deal with their threat quite easily.
Yeah, in terms of their threat, they don't really offer much at all. In terms of expected goals this season, excluding penalties, they are ahead of only Newcastle United, and have taken the fewest shots in the whole of the Premier League with 284, 9 behind Sheffield United. Their XG per shot as well is the second worst. XG per shot, for those that don't know, offers an insight into how clear cut the average chance is for you, how close to goal sort of thing. So obviously, if you're the second worst, most of the shots that you're taking are quite poor in comparison to normal. On the defensive side, though, they are decent, and I think it's why they stay in the league. Really, they've got a mid-table defence for me, or maybe even slightly above. And I think their goalkeeper in particular, I'm not sure you're aware, Dave, Vicente Guaita, is overperformed considerably this season.
Yeah, I didn't have the exact numbers, but I knew he was up there with like I can't think of the Newcastle goalkeeper's name, but I just know he'd been I know he'd had a decent season and he'd been quite solid for them. Did you know much about his history? Because I didn't know how old. He's like 33, I think.
No, I know very, very little about him, to be honest. I think he came in I think he came in. This is a complete guess, really, but I think he came in due to an injury or something because he just seemed to starting matches for Palace. I don't know where really. I think it was I don't think he's been in goal all season, has he?
No, I don't think so either. But I'm similar to you.
Mind you, it says he's played 27 90s here. So
Okay,
there's only been 2 matches that he hasn't started, that he hasn't played the full game in. So maybe he's just under the radar.
But it's fair to say he hasn't had a fantastic career. Otherwise, I assume we'd know about him. So it's a little bit of a stroke of luck for Palace, really, that he's kind of ended up becoming one of the league's better goalkeepers, I think.
Yeah, I mean, according to post-shot expected goals, he's saved 8.2 goals more than normal rate than expected.
How many?
So 8.2.
That's quite big. Yeah, that's
post shot as well. And as you said, the only goalkeeper to outdo that is Dubravka in Newcastle's goal. He's overperformed by 8.7 goals. But usually, I mean, keepers can have one-off seasons like this, but that tends to offer an insight into whether a keeper is saving, above average rate, to an above average level sort of thing. So if he saved his team 8.2 goals, that's considerable, and that's a fair few results. I mean, I assume Palace have won a fair few games by 1-0, for example.
I think it's especially good when you're the side who don't tend to score a lot of goals or create a lot of attacking chances, because if you look at Sheffield United, who are obviously down there with Palace in terms of kind of attacking output and goals in general, that they don't score or create a lot, but their defense is so good that they can be mounting a challenge for Europe. And all right, so Palace are a little bit of a lesser extent to that, but I think that defense is kind of being the difference between them being mid-table and them potentially fighting off relegation.
Yeah. So we'll go with verdict then. So what are you expecting for Palace, assuming that's the match when Liverpool can first win the league, if all goes to plan?
I just think there'd be such a buzz to get over the line after 3.5 months of waiting. Although you could argue it's been longer than that, because for me the title was done before Christmas. I just think the Liverpool players will be really at it just to get over the line, and I think it might not. And I'm not saying they'll blow them away, but I'd fancy a clean sheet. I'd go 2-0 for Liverpool in that one.
I think I'm going to go with that as well. I didn't actually ask you for the score for the Everton game, did I?
Yeah, I wasn't going to remind you. For Everton, I think it could be. I don't know.
I can see you clenching your fist there.
I'm going to go.
Are you about a 4-0?
honestly, I can think something like a 3-0. I keep replaying the Dortmund Schalke game.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. I think, although that was at Dortmund, whereas this is at Goodison, it just reminds me of where Schalke were kind of loitering mid-table, not a lot to play for. Dortmund was still on for the title at that point, and they kind of were just by far the better side. And I can see something like that happening again this Sunday in a similar type derby.
Yeah, I think I'd go 2-0 Palace, and Everton about the same, maybe 3. It depends how Liverpool respond to this break. Liverpool, historically, to be honest, without rhythm, Liverpool don't tend to do that great. It's when we get a rhythm, we start to really perform. We can't possibly have a rhythm without 3 months of matches. So, maybe it'll be a little bit more disjointed than we used to seeing. But if Liverpool really want to come off the blocks because they haven't played for 3 months, then I think that's probably going to be unfortunate for Everton.
I'll tell you what is interesting, Josh, just before we do round up, I don't think Everton have played no game has been competitive, but I don't think they've played any opposition in a behind closed doors friendly prior to the start of the season. I know they've had an inter-game between themselves, but I don't think they've played any other sides, and I wonder if that's going to be a little bit difficult in terms of getting back up to match fitness.
Yeah, that feels like quite a strange move, to be honest. I think Liverpool might have played as many as 2, but I'm not sure. I know for certain he played Blackburn, but yeah, we'll see anyway.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us anyway, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much, mate, and hopefully you go a little bit easy on Everton Sunday.
Hopefully not, to be honest. Yeah, so this episode has been a little bit different, testing a few things. So if you enjoyed it, give us a shout. Apologies to those who have listened, but if you do want to go and check out the visualization reviews, just YouTube it, Analysing Anfield, the latest episode, and you'll be able to watch back. So we'll see if we keep it from this week moving forward. But thanks for tuning in anyway, and hopefully by the next time we record, Liverpool will have won the league. Thanks for tuning in. See you later. See you next week.
Cheers.